These are the latest visuals we are bringing to you from Venezuela. These are the protest visuals live from Caracas. And for more details and perspective on this news story, I am joined in by Kate Fisher, our Wion correspondent, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Let's quickly go across to Kate. Kate, a very warm welcome to you. Let me begin by taking the latest update on the clashes in Caracas. What are you picking from your sources?
The clashes have been violent and widespread across the country. Here in Washington, I think there has been frustration felt by the Trump administration here, who clearly began Tuesday hoping that things were going to go their way in Venezuela. This statement from Juan Guaido, the interim president that is recognized by the United States and several other world powers. He made this speech surrounded by members of the Venezuelan military, suggesting that today was the day that he was going to get his supporters to take to the streets and to overthrow President Maduro. Clearly, the Trump administration excited by this. This is what they have wanted for some time. We heard from John Bolton, from President Trump on Twitter, but then towards the end of Tuesday, it appeared things weren't really going the way that the US and Maduro's opposition had hoped. President Maduro remains in power in Venezuela at the moment. Secretary of State, the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, giving an interview and showing really some frustration at this.
Right. Kate, I'm just about to come to that only. While Maduro has declared a victory over this attempted coup of sorts, reports by Mike Pompeo, his statement, by the US Secretary of State suggesting that Maduro was fleeing off to Cuba, indicate Maduro's weakening stance.
Yeah, that's right. The Secretary of State giving an interview on CNN here saying that he had been told, we don't know how or who told him, that Nicolas Maduro had been ready to board a plane from Venezuela to Cuba to effectively put himself into exile. But that Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, said he understood that Russia, the Kremlin, had got in touch with President Maduro and persuaded him not to do that. Again, he didn't elaborate on how he knew this or indeed what part of the Kremlin had been in touch with Maduro. But it appears from what he was saying that the Trump administration had assumed that this was that they'd kind of got Guaido to overthrow Maduro. But then at the last minute, he changed his mind with the support of Russia. And the Trump administration has been very strong in its condemnation of the Russians over this. John Bolton saying that we regard actions they've taken in Venezuela as something we regard with the utmost seriousness. That's the National Security Advisor. And also members of the Republican Party, Lindsey Graham, who's a senator and very close to Donald Trump, the president, also saying that he felt that if Russia had not interfered in Venezuela, then Maduro would have been gone a long time ago. And he's, yeah.
All right, Kate, you mentioned that U.S. has throughout been very strong in its condemnation of the Maduro regime. I would also like to ask you, how has Venezuela been affected by the sanctions, and also including the sanctions on the Venezuelan foreign minister?
Well, Venezuelans have now been living for a very long time in very harsh conditions because of the punitive sanctions that have been imposed on them. Inflation is out of control. People are struggling to buy basic goods, basic food. Water is only on for a short amount of time during the day. So electricity and water are limited for most Venezuelans. Food is very expensive and scarce. The supermarkets stock very little. And medicine, healthcare has been hugely affected. People who need drugs and medication to stay alive are struggling to either get them or be able to afford to buy them. Hospitals are struggling, clinics and so on. So the Venezuelan people have been living under increasingly difficult and harsh conditions, and really life, we understand from what we hear and what's been reported that life is really an everyday struggle to survive. And that is largely down to the fact that these punitive sanctions have been put on the country with the idea that kind of making life tough for the people will help to perhaps energize them to go against President Maduro and try to oust him from power. But so far, he has managed to cling to that.
All right, Kate, I'm going to quickly come to the attempted coup. This is the first time that Juan Guaido has managed to gather partial military support, even though it is partial. Do you think that the military support is the new bone of contention between Guaido and Maduro?
The military support, clearly Juan Guaido felt at the start of Tuesday that he had sufficient support from the military to go ahead with his attempt to overthrow Maduro entirely. And he gave that statement surrounded by some members of the military. And from what we understand from the US side, that there were 3 key members of Maduro's government who were intending to swap their allegiance to Juan Guaido. They were the head of the Presidential Guard, the commander, the Chief Judge of the Supreme Court, and the Defense Minister, all named, in fact, by John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, as men who had said that they would join Juan Guaido, but it appears they decided not to do that, if indeed they were going to do it in the first place. And then throughout Tuesday, we saw them show their allegiance to Maduro, kind of leaving Juan Guaido without those key allies from the Maduro's inner circle, which would have been vital for him in order to continue this successful overthrow. As things stand, those men...
All right, so we seem to have lost Kate due to some technical glitches, but some very interesting developments taking place in Venezuela. And Kate just mentioned what could have been the reasons behind this failed attempted coup in Venezuela. But we will continue to bring you all the latest from Caracas in the coming days.